Like the sounds, the quiet sounds of Churchill. All right, are we good to go out?
Yeah.
All right, we call this meeting to order at 7:02. If we can do a roll call, we'll stand for the pledge and where are we?
Eric Matt's here.
Here.
Andrea Tatella, Councilmember. Councilmember Valerie Wright Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Diane Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Matt Castillo.
Present.
Councilmember Brooke Rochette Williams.
Here.
And online we have Deb Cassini Klein.
Here.
I'm still here. All right, if you can rise to the pledge from the table. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right. It is July. It is apparently hot. We are currently rocking without air conditioning. Not the worst thing in the world, except when you're running through soccer practice. This, but we will jump straight to what we have on the agenda, and we have a special guest, Patty Martin. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Do you have a microphone that I need to be worried about?
No, just make sure you keep yourself directed to the.
Okay.
Now.
Good, and you're going to share my slides, yeah.
when we get there.
Okay. So thank you so much for inviting me, neighbors. I appreciate the chance to share what we've been doing with you and invite you into our process as well. I'm going to go through a little bit about how we planned the net zero building and where we're taking it from here. I know most of you have seen our building. How many, if anyone here has not been to our building? Okay, so I don't need to dwell on the particulars too much. What I mostly want to deal with is how did we get to where we are and what might we have as lessons learned if you're going forward from not having to repeat some of the disasters. Next, please. So we started in the, do you advance slides?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I just wanted to put this in context that we are living in very terribly troubling times. If anyone can doubt that we're dealing with climate change on a daily present basis, we just need to go outside. They've had to invent purple air monitors now, purple air because red isn't sufficient. And this kind of thing is not something that we can sustain if we want to continue going forward. Next, please. So we look at, next please. Okay, so we look at the context of this climate emergency that we're in is that the laws of nature are not negotiable. We have to begin adjusting how we do things to fit into the way of the world that is irreversible and unchangeable by people. And we have to be able to move to a more sustainable system. And that means we have to examine things that are in our control and do what we can to improve them so that we can go forward with confidence and with an idea that we're addressing the problems that we have, but also making the future better for those who come after us. Next, please. So there are 3 pathways forward, and all of them can be practiced at the local level. One being renewable and sustainable energy systems, not fuel switching, but changing systems. The second one being regenerative agriculture, so that you produce food in ways that restore the fertility of the land instead of exhaust it. You can do that on the local level by encouraging local ordinances that allow people to farm in their front yard if they want to without having fines, and putting up fence to protect their vegetables from the deer and things of that nature. There are lots of things we can do at the local level to help that, including pollinator gardens and public spaces. And we can practice circular economy. In other words, looking when you're doing procurement at things that are made in ways that are recyclable or that are designed to be reclaimed and retrieved. We'll touch on some of this as I go through how we planned our building. Next, please. So, you know, we have a case study of Forest Hills, which is your neighbor. I don't need to show you pictures of Forest Hills. Next, please. Because you've been there in the days of the streetcar and beyond. What we did was, we did adopt a resolution that we would still be in the climate Accord, and we adopted that in 2016 in January. And we also established a goal of establishing net zero carbon emissions, not net zero energy use, but net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We figured that would be enough time to allow for transformations, transitions, and wouldn't be so onerous on instant time. Some people adopted net zero by 2030, and we thought that was a little bit unrealistic given what we're dealing with. I wanted to kind of review from our climate plan the vulnerabilities that we found, because I think we share those. Not only the droughts and the heavy waterfalls that come, and I know you have MS4 issues as we do with stormwater management, but also the landslide vulnerability, because this area is heavily undermined. As recently as 1965, there was still coal mining in this area. Very little of that land has been remediated or addressed. And a lot of things were built on filled land before. And so we've had a couple of tragic and disastrous landslides in our area, and I know you have some of the same kind of terrain. So this is one of the things that drove our interest in mitigating climate issues to the extent that we do control that. Thanks, please. So we did adopt a climate plan, but before that, we were sort of shoved into having to deal with the new borough building. Our 1922 establishment, which was, I think, originally built as a fire station where the horses were in the back, and then it was converted to a municipal building at a later date. They didn't do too much to it. And then in the 90s, they did an upgrade and installed an exteriorly applied elevator shaft with a glass, thing, and thought it was fixed. Well, we had a rather expensive disability claim. A police officer had sprained an ankle, and while trying to get to his workstation on crutches, he fell and broke a hip. So minor injury turned into major disaster, and we realized the building was not really repairable up to standards of modern events. The heating system was a mess. It had several different zones. They didn't talk to each other. You don't need the details, but that to me was an important motivator. So we did begin with some planning goals. We looked at fiduciary responsibility, not only to our immediate budget, but to taxpayers of the future. When you build a public building, the life cycle of that building is the obligation of the taxpayers for as long as that building is in use. So your usual 2 to 3 year business cycle payback computations are completely irrelevant. And you have to reconfigure your thinking to look at the life cycle cost of the building as your time frame. And we were looking at co-locating a number of functions. The police, indeed, and the administrative and council functions, but also we wanted to include the community room and a better space for the library, both of which were in different buildings, neither of which were optimal at that time. And there was an interest in looking at environmentally efficient solutions. Next slide, please. So we did have a lot of community input. We had initially we had Hoffman Associates doing the visualizing with us. We had 4 charrettes in the community, including a number of neighborhood meetings in kitchens and dining rooms. And we gathered a lot of input from the public. We didn't do a survey because this was pre-COVID days when we didn't need to survey people in order to get input. But the priorities that emerged from these discussions were, first of all, they didn't want to raise taxes. They stand on the fact they haven't raised taxes for 13 years and they're not going to do it now. We got it, no problem. They wanted to have better service, however. A lot of the ability to get in and out of the borough building on Ardmore Boulevard was severely limited by the traffic, by the lack of parking, by the lack of access to spaces within the building. We wanted to preserve the history. And what history do we want to preserve? It was the character of being an innovative center. This was the Westinghouse Research Center. It was a place where many new inventions had come into the world from that area. And many of the people who lived there were the engineers and the creators who did that. They wanted to preserve that. And they also wanted a green design. Next, please. So we looked at, first of all, what are we looking to gain in the way of performance? The building we were in was costing about $2.21 a square foot, and it wasn't performing well. We had wild excursions of price when the gas prices went up. We had wild excursions of cost when the furnaces failed or the air conditioning unit died or the water heater broke. We had all those things happen. We looked at a conventional building where the operating cost would be about $1.47 a square foot. And then we looked at passive solar design cost is about 97 cents a square foot. So we were already leaning in that direction just on the cost parameters. Next, please. The next thing we did was not send for the architect to give us designs. We sat down with sharp pencils and said, what can we afford to spend on a new building? We own a piece of land, so we didn't have a land cost. We would have two properties that we could sell, the magistrate's building and the borough building itself, and the senior center, which is down on Avenue A. And we had a favorable bond environment, so we were able to look at refinancing our bonds and acquiring about a $3.58 million addition to our bond package. This is before we had one RX rendering. We allocated a portion from the corrective action budget for the MS4 and stormwater management. We allocated a portion of paving budget one time. We took a tenth, half of that, I think, for 1 year. And then we had money in both the capital budget and the budget reserve that we could allocate. And we've had a grant from the CITF process for the library. So we already had our financing project in mind. We had a hard stop at 5.02 million, period. No more than that. Next slide. So the architect came back. We were going to move the building from the existing site to the proposed site on Greensburg Pike. You guys all know this. You've seen this slide a million times. Go ahead. So we looked at having a multifunctional space. Now we arrived at this not because the architect came in and was instantly responsive to those beautiful charts. He came in initially with a $7.5 million building. It was gorgeous. It had a coffee shop in the corner. It had a separate, room for community functions. It had a full kitchen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, we can't afford this, go away. We sent them away 3 times to value engineer. They finally got so exasperated. They said, the only thing we can do is lob off the library. And they said, well, how much would that cost? And they said, well, about $200,000. So Jay Costa said, I can get you $200,000 to put the library back, and that was it. But the key to this was the flexible walls between the community room and the library, and between the community room and the council. And that would not have happened without us saying we have a hard stop. We're not going to spend any more than we have. And, we just sent them away and sent them away. Architects are very creative people. They will meet whatever you need, but you've got to tell them what you need, right? So that was one of our first lessons, is that you don't let the vendors drive the train. Know what you want to spend and they will meet your need. Next, please. So we also had the issue of the passive solar design. Now, this is tilted on the lot. I don't know what your zoning regulations look like, but they do not allow for catty corner buildings on the lots in most cases. We had to get 3 variances in our zoning ordinance for the corners of that building because they were not enough setback from the lot. They said, well, you need a bigger lot if you're going to do that. We said, no, you're going to amend this so we can have a variance to tilt this so that we can have that wide south facing roof. And it fits on the plot perfectly well. So zoning board turned it down. We had to override it by vote of council and do a special variance. So now we are looking at our zoning ordinances and are making amendments to allow for passive solar design on both existing and new construction. So we took that lesson into an amendment to our zoning, and it should be up for hearing. The county is reviewing it, so it'll take a while. And then the plantings plan had to be designed with not shading the south facing roof. Put all the plants you want on the north side, the ones on the south side can't get higher than the roof bottom. So that was another thing that, we had to do some adjustments with. Next, please. So we looked at also a heating system that would be consistent with a passive solar design. And that also would look forward to the climate conditions we were likely to face. We did not want to have an auxiliary gas furnace. And so we did look at a number of systems and came to a geothermal heating and cooling system, which uses a non-toxic heat exchange medium. So even the part that's underground is not toxic if there should ever be a leak. Now, we originally had it designed for 1,250-foot wells deep. They're going to be right along the edge of the building, 150 feet down. They did a test bore. They hit the coal mine at 95 feet. Nobody knew it was there. It's not on the map. The old guy said, yeah, there's a map under that hill. Well, we hit the coal mine. So they were gonna say, okay, never mind, we'll put in a gas furnace. I said, wait a minute. The biggest cost is getting the drill to the site. Whether he makes 10 holes or 50 holes, there's hardly any difference in the price. So they priced out making 39 holes instead of 12. And we did the 39 hole array, which is under the parking lot. Now, this was done before we did the building because it dug up the ground. You know, this is the messiest part. Nowadays, even since 2018, when we were doing this, the heat exchangers and the heat pumps have advanced tremendously. So before you look at doing a geothermal well, you want to look at the modern available heat exchange heat pumps and air-to-air heat pumps instead of going to this immediately. So there have been significant advances and we may not need to do this for this kind of a building. Next, please. So we had, of course, the efficient design. It's super insulated. You've seen the building, but we deliberately asked for super insulation, and that's part of the solar design. Next, please. And we also used natural materials. Now, this was partly an indoor air quality issue because you don't have things that emit volatile organic compounds into the air. So it helps the workers in the space, and it also is a less expensive proposition. So if your carpet gets dirty, you don't have to take out the whole carpet. You just replace the blocks that are soiled. Next slide, please. Polished concrete floors took some convincing. I had to drag them down to Phipps to show them what they looked because they thought they would be ugly, but they're not really. And then the photovoltaic roof. This was one of the lessons learned. They decided that we could add the solar later if we could afford it, and they didn't bid the solar with the roof. They bid a roofing contract, and then they said, oh, okay, it's gonna be all right. We'll bid the solar contract next. So two things happened. The roofers are union, solar guys are not. We had interesting times among the plumbers and the carpenters and the solar guys. There's this huge no-fly zone on the roof. You can't just run a pipe and stick it through the roof wherever you want. You've got this big. So there was a lot of negotiation. The construction meetings on Tuesdays were interesting sometimes, but you aren't going to have to go through that if you build the roof and the solar at the same time. There are more than one company now that do solar roofs and roofs together. The other thing that you would not have to face that we had to deal with was we had to do a power purchase agreement for 2 reasons. One, the only way the solar tax credit could be taken was by a third-party taxable entity, because as a non-taxing organization, we weren't eligible. And secondly, the state of Pennsylvania, in its infinite wisdom, did not fund the solar energy program in the 2 years that we could have used it. It just wasn't in the budget. It was on the books. You look it up, it was there. Oh yes, we're just not taking applications this year, sorry. So we didn't have access to that. So you might have that. But the Inflation Reduction Act has made an adjustment so that nonprofit entities can take the equivalent of the tax credit as a reduction in the price. So if you put in a solar installation, you submit documentation, and they'll send you 30% of that. So that was a huge change in the Inflation Reduction Act that just passed this last year. Thanks. So we have actually achieved net zero on this building. We weren't sure at the beginning whether we would. But except for the months of November, December, January, some of February, we are making more electricity than we use on site. In other words, the plug load of the building is satisfied by what is in the coming down on the photovoltaic side. Next slide, please. And we have a zero bill. And this is the March bill, our typical March bill. We have a $3,000 credit from the prior summer. At the beginning of September, we might have a $7,000 or $8,000 credit at the end of the summer when we start. So one of the issues that we've been struggling with is we have 24 electricity accounts. I would like to take this overage and apply it to some of my other retail purchases and draw down our retail expenses because they only pay wholesale price, 3 cents kilowatt hour. But when we have to buy it at night, we have to pay retail. So it would be better to displace our retail purchases if we can, and then only send the net beyond that to the wholesale market. So that's something that we're working on right now, and it's going to require a change in tariff at the State Public Utility Commission, and it's going to require a significant change in attitude with the power company. Next slide. So we also were looking at the water management system, not just the energy management system. And we have arranged for none of the water that falls on that site in storms to leave the site. Anything that falls on the building goes into those rain ponds at the bottom of the building, the pebbles with the wells. And you can see in the lower part of the picture, there's a domed well. They go down 75 feet. And the water drains into there rather than go off into the sidewalk. Next slide, please. And the bioswale sometimes has ducks in it in spring, but the paving areas are sloped toward that bioswale. They're slightly sloped, so the water flows inwards instead of out into the storm sewers. So our MS4 requirement was satisfied with this building, and it actually helped considerably. We did look at permeable paving for the parking lot, but it was just cost prohibitive at this point in time. Next, please. So we opened in January 2018, next please. And what we're doing next is, we ended up with safer functioning of both the police. Next one, because you guys have seen this, you don't need to go through this. And the library, I'm sure some of you and your constituents go to the library, it's a lot closer. Next, please. And we've had a team of really good people. I would recommend any of those guys to you if you're looking to do this. Next, please. So we looked at under our climate plan, as well as our operating expense controls looking forward. We looked at the Pennsylvania Guaranteed Energy Savings Program, and we decided that that might be something that offered us a way to catch up on a lot of deferred maintenance and also advance our climate objectives with efficiency improvements and additional solar in the borough. So we interviewed 4 companies and we hired Siemens to work with us. They have done engineering audits of all of our borough buildings now as of earlier this year. And we've begun the scope of work contracting to do the energy efficiency upgrades in our buildings. And we're going to be putting more solar energy on additional buildings. The community pool will have a solar installation over the roof. There's nothing in the way there to prevent that. The municipal parking canopy, which was provided for with an outlet in the parking lot from the original construction. That will be initially a canopy to just shelter police vehicles, but eventually it will have an electric charging station under it. Next slide, please. And we're going to put it on the Public Works garage, the salt storage shed, and the fire station, so that we will have a total of 875 kilowatts of photovoltaic in our little buildings themselves. And that is greater than the electric load for all of those buildings combined. So we will have our borough operations reach net zero by the end of next year. So I think next one, that last one. Yeah, I think the only other thing I would say to you would be, if you're going to go into a construction or even a complicated process like this, I would definitely hire a clerk of the works that's yours. We used our general contractor for that, and it was, you know, I went to the construction meetings because I was finance chair, and you don't sign off on invoices if you haven't seen the work, right? So you need somebody who's on your team, you know, one of you guys, who is willing to go there and verify, yes, work was done, I see it, it is what it says here, and therefore you get paid. It's a bit of work. Mr. Morris deserves a halo to be polished on his head for surviving this under the time that he did it. So, any questions or comments or anything I can help you with?
I just have one question. The runoff water that's taken down underground,
Yeah,
is it stored there or?
nope, it seeps into the ground, it goes into the groundwater. Yep, we had to guarantee it doesn't go into the coal mine, which is why I made them plug that test hole and guarantee that nothing that we did disturbed the coal mine. Because if you do disturb the coal mine, you're responsible for anything that comes out of it or is alleged to have come out of it. And we didn't want to mess with that at all.
We walk past it just about every day, because my wife and I walk past it.
Yeah.
So when that was under construction, every day we walk by.
Yeah.
To see what was new. Interesting.
It was quite a process. It was winter time too. I was surprised how much of it they did during cold weather. You So,
Patty, can you talk a little about the batteries that project?
okay, that's a little bit beyond where the borough is.
Okay.
We are looking at doing a microgrid. And I don't know if we'll get the grant, so it's speculative, but because we will have a constellation of buildings in the business district, and the Forest Hills Community Alliance is looking at putting a microgrid, an eco district in the business district. And we've had a study by the master's students at CMU, and we've had an analysis by Duquesne Light saying that it would not impede the operation of the grid, and may in fact improve the operation of the grid. So that, I just got that last Thursday. So we are exploring doing a microgrid there, which would be interesting if we could get a battery of say 500 to 1,000 kilowatts. We could back up our own needs 100% and drop it off the grid. Now, there's a lot of ifs there, a lot of ifs, you know, but it's something that we're exploring and looking at what it would take to do that.
Excited. Yeah. So I have a question, a follow-up question. How was the relationship with CMU developed? Because I did attend one of your council meetings and you all were discussing this microgrid.
Well, there are several classes at both CMU and Pitt where students have to do a capstone project in sustainability. And so I've contacted those professors and asked them if they, and I tell them projects that we have available to work on. And if they have an interest or have a student group that's interested in doing that, then we, you know, put it into the roster. And if they take one, and so far we've been lucky, we get a master's class almost every year. It's very helpful, actually, especially the master's level students. I've had mixed success with undergraduate students. You know, it depends a lot on how much time and energy the professor puts into it. And I had one group of absolutely brilliant people, but they were all from China. They didn't have really good English, and they proposed really interesting things about promoting our district, like, you know, the wall outside of the speeding mark. They said, make a pink wall for people to make photographs as a destination. Okay, that's gonna work. A pink wall. But, you know, they were really cute. They just, no context. But most of the time, if you get a master's class, I can give you a list of who the professors are that we talk to.
And I know that there was some information that was sent out to property owners that are interested in possibly entertaining solar
Yes.
conservation on their, or adding solar panels on the roof. Do you have any recommendations for residents about the process for doing something like that?
There are two things. First, the Pennsylvania Solar Association has an office in Pittsburgh. They have a tremendous amount of help. And also the Pennsylvania Solar Alliance, which is also has an office down the Energy Innovation Center. They have people who will do one-on-one consulting. In addition, the Investment Reduction Act has really favorable conditions for individuals even under the tax code. So there are a lot of situations, even since the last time we mailed to our customers, our citizens, where things have improved the prospects of solar. Plus, both the gas company and the electric company have announced rate increases pending in this next year or 18 months. And presuming the Public Utility Commission approves those in all or part, people are facing increase in costs, so they have a bigger incentive to look at ways to save. And you can get any number of solar vendors to come out and you can even do it on GIS on your phone and put in your address and it'll tell you what the solar potential of your house is. Mine is 0. I don't even see my roof in the summertime because I have these huge trees. So there's no way I can put solar on my roof. Yeah. Okay. Well, anytime I can be helped you, where I am.
I do have, first of all, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming out and sharing with us, obviously.
Yeah.
I have a couple just kind of quick questions for my understanding. One was in regard to the project itself, and the kind of financing of it. So you took out the bonds that I wasn't quite sure, was the total amount just for the project or was that inclusive of an existing bond?
No, we refinanced a bond and added 3.8 to it.
And then my second question, I think for our folks in particular, so can you tell me a little bit about the total amount of grant funding you were able to get from the state and kind of what that process was? I'm a big fan of getting my grant.
It was
funding.
very frustrating because, as I said, most of the programs that would have been directly relevant at that time were not funded at that time. And so they were not available to us, even though they might be if they were funded. The other thing was that we did go through the CITF process with the COG and the whole 9 yards with Jay Costa to add back that bay of the building that would have, had the library. They said, well, we just leave the library where it is, and there's no, not to do that, So that was the only real grant money that we had in there. And again, that changes from time to time, and the circumstances right now are very different than they were in 2017.
And that was about 200,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
And of course, there have been a lot of changes in the cost of construction as well. So, these days, everything is a lot more expensive than it might have been in 2016, 2017, when we were scoping this out.
Unfortunate, but true.
And this was pre-COVID too, so the supply chain chaos had not happened yet.
The 13,000 possible complications that have happened since then. And yet it's a brilliant project, right?
Yeah.
And a wonderful one. I don't know if anybody else had any other questions?
Are there different types of solar panels that you can choose from? And
There are actually, there are several, you can do ground mounted ones, which is what we're putting over the parking lot. You can have, there are some now that are even shingles. And if you go to Scallo Solar, they have a roof display, which is like a shopping, like a test drive. And they have been monitoring the performance of a whole variety of solar arrays for a number of years. And you can go up there, they have them mounted on green roofs, they have them in different colors of shingles, they have them this way, they have them bifacial, they have all kinds. You can go up and look at them. And they will explain the whole thing to you with great detail.
I had a question
Yeah.
regarding, like, you mentioned the roof and then having solar panels on added. If there's any issues with the roof, how does that affect the solar panel?
Okay, you don't want to put a solar system on an old roof. You want to put it on a roof either at a time when you're replacing the roof, as is the case for the buildings that we're putting solar on, or in a situation where you have a new building with a new roof. You don't want to put a 20-year life, installation on something that has only 5 years of life left. So, and that would be true for a homeowner as well, or a business. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.
Appreciate everything. Again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. I will leave you to your labors.
The fun continues as you know.
Yeah.
So night.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Great information, I think fair to say. Point out the challenges of grant funding, you know, that particularly fit I like the potential. Okay, moving forward on to public comments. We will start in the room. If anyone wants to comment, 3 minutes. If you stand, if you're able, state your name and your address. And then we'll go online after we can start the room. So, absolutely.
On a much more mundane level, this relates to some of the deer issues that have been raised in the recent bulletin.
Can we get your?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barry, just,
I know we know you, but
176 Thornberry Drive.
thank you.
There is currently a meeting on April 20th at the Blackbridge Civic Association.
Yeah.
And accordingly, subsequent to this, there are some other meetings planned, or at least tentatively planned. How is the average citizen going to find out about this? Is there some, is it exclusively on the website? Are you going to be sending out other bulletins?
We will have every means that we have for communicating from the borough to announce that. That'll be on the website, that'll be on the Savvy Citizen, that will be, you know, in newsletters, that will be in every way that we can possibly get that information out.
Okay. And lastly, is there a timetable wherein the council is going to make recommendations, regardless of what the recommendations are? Because I know the number of people, at least in our community,
Okay.
are trying to plan for what they're going to do with their shrubbery, which
Sure.
has been devastated. And a lot of that will be predicated upon what plans are offered. Again, I know there's controversy there, with deer lovers and deer haters, and this is an uncomfortable position throughout the state.
Yeah.
But is there something, there are about 3 months left of good weather, if you will. So is there some plan to make recommendations, regardless of what they are? And roughly what timetable do you envision making those recommendations?
Well, I think that there are several ways to look at this. One is that, it's okay if I,
Yes.
yeah.
I would feel good.
Okay, one is to segment the issues and try to bring recommendations on each of those categories. I think we pretty much decided that a comprehensive report and recommendation is the better way to go. And so what that involves is, like anything else, this issue is now so much more complex than it was a few years ago because of the science. And the more we read, the more we find out that, for example, a lot of the things that are considered to be true based on studies, the studies are flawed, and all of that. So we want to do the job of digging through this, you know, at that level, so that when we come to the council and to the public with recommendations, that we've really done our homework. So the short answer is, I don't think we're going to have this until towards the end of the year. It's going to take that long and that much study and that much sorting through to come up with something that is worthy.
The end of the calendar year.
Yeah, I think that, I'll just make this editorial comment. I think it's easy for people to feel that all we have to do is kill deer. And it is so much more complicated than that. And I know people might feel better, you know, if we did something, but if that something is not effective, and if that is not the best way to address the issue of deer, it's irresponsible for us to suggest that that's.
Just gonna come, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
I'm sorry. Who is that?
That's, she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I promoted Kathy to panelist,
okay.
she's speaking
So
next,
that-
but she was.
So that's the answer. I wish that I could tell you that this was going to be a short-term, resolution. Better to be thorough and accurate, so that when we make recommendations, we bring all the information to the public so that you understand what we've learned.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else in the room? And I'm gonna move to online, and Kathy, you have been promoted.
I did not mean to raise my hand, so I saw that Alex wanted to promote me to panelist, and I just wanted to say I didn't want to speak. Sorry.
No worries at all. Appreciate your either way. So thank you either way. All right, is there anyone else who did wish to speak online? If you can put raise your hand, we can promote you. If not, we will move on. I always do give an extra second, just because I like to make sure people have the opportunity. Sometimes it takes people longer to find the button. But looks like we do not have anybody else, so we are going to close public comments and move on to the ordinary items if we might.
Mr. President, I move to accept the meeting minutes from the Monday, June 5th, 2023 Borough Council Workshop Meeting and the Monday, June 12th, 2023 regular council meeting.
Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes are accepted without opposition. Moving on to the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor, if you would like to give us a commentary.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. Chief Ron Riley reported to me that there were no critical or significant incidents during the month of June 2023. Our officers handled a total of 961 events, total of 6,218 to date, consisting of both calls for service and proactive patrols and engagements and details, resulting in 5 arrests. The department's 5 police vehicles logged a total of 5,319 miles this month. Year to date, that's 29,041 miles. Chief Ronald Ackley has reported that the total amount of magisterial fines collected for the month of June 2023 was $1,147.50. The total for the year, $5,110.12. The ticket summary for the month of June 23 was 36. 1 non-traffic, 1 parking, and 15 traffic tickets, so a decrease from last month. In the month of June, the department has put into service some long-awaited In the month of June, the department put into service some long-awaited 3 essential pieces of equipment. The new devices were purchased to replace older and outdated versions that were less effective. They were the Axon Fleet 3 in-car camera systems, Troy Arms AR-15 rifles, and Taser 7 less lethal weapons. All officers have received the necessary mandated training and certification to begin utilizing these tools and to put into service. Chief also says that at this time of the year, the department begins to experience a rise in complaints of borough ordinance violations, specifically as they're related to property maintenance, unkept and unsightly lawns, grass not being cut, the accumulation of yard waste and trimmings, garbage cans permanently left out in the sight of street view, and the burning of yard waste and trimmings are most common complaints received. Residents are reminded to please adhere to all applicable ordinances at all times and to be mindful of their responsibilities as a property owner. Help set Churchill apart and keep it one of the premier places to call home. Details and other related statistics concerning the police department during the month of June 2023 are reported on the attached police department reports. Thank you.
Thank you. This time, I entertain a motion to accept the mayor's report.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion, questions for the chief? Anything? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the mayor's report is accepted without opposition. Moving on to number 5 and 6.
Mr. President, I motion to accept the treasurer's report for June 30th, 2023, and a motion to direct the finance officer to pay the bills for the borough of Churchill accrued through June 12th, 2023.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? As a matter of discussion, at some point I'm gonna get smart and turn this over to the finance chair, so I don't have to read it every time. I just realized I can do that. That really sounds like a better idea in the place of discussion that I don't have to read it, but I will read this time. Sorted that out, right? Like, why do I read them up every time?
Why do you?
I don't know.
You're just so good at it.
I am not. As a matter of discussion, we try to make sure that our taxpayers understand the large expenditures. This month we have 5, starting with our 2023 paving program going out to A. Baroni Incorporated, the amount of $333,877.72. Our Gateway Engineering June 2023 bill, I assume that should read. No worries. Glad I was able to actually.
We're slow pay, but not that slow.
Right. If it was that slow, it'd definitely be my fault. I'll take the heat for it. And then it's the amount of $37,084.40. The Churchill Borough Volunteer Fire Truck loan, in the amount of $33,000. State Pipe Services, CCTV, which is not what I first thought it was doing. When I first came out, I thought it was cable somehow. Actual cable. Payment application number 2, in the amount of $21,845.83. And with the landscape and construction, the amount of $17,013.57. Is there any other discussion regarding either the bills or the treasurer's reports? Hearing
I have a comment.
that, well, the floor is yours.
You may notice in the bank statement balances that there is that Parks and Recreation line that has been added on.
And also added, we put the pensions amount.
Yes, the pensions on there.
So you'll be able to see those month for
Yes.
month and in the change every year.
Yes.
Appreciate, where did that money come from? That
Oh, I
Parks
have no
and Rec?
idea.
But it has to come from the tax truck.
Grant money.
Grant money.
Grant money from the.
Out of here. Talking about. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passed without opposition. Bills will be paid. Moving on to number 7.
I will be happy to.
Yes, that's my item number 7 right there.
Mr. President, I move to direct the borough manager to submit to Allegheny County Planning and Churchill Borough Planning a draft C1 zoning district amendment as a precursor to advertise and schedule a public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Generally, in the space of zoning, I look to our solicitor, give the 10-second version. If there's anything that's gonna just spell it out, then we can move forward with that in further discussion.
Sure. The draft ordinance that is in council's packet that you're moving forward this time is a pretty general update of some of the commercial zoning district regulations in the borough zoning code, which are frankly long overdue. And this is, we always often refer to the zoning ordinance as a living document, and this is just sort of another step in its evolution. So we're going to be working closely with the borough manager, with Ashik, to continue to get these regulations updated. So this is the first step. And what you're doing today is essentially kicking off the public process. And that is by a motion to approve this draft. You are not really approving the ordinance yet, but you are sending it to the county planning department. You are sending it to your borough planning commission. There's a review period that will occur for both of those. And we'll be looking at a public hearing to hear from the public at one of the September meetings. And all that has to happen before you can vote on the actual ordinance itself.
Thank you. That being said, is there any other discussion on the matter?
I have a comment. I think we all know that this zoning change is a bit abrupt. We just talked about the homeowner who asked about the deer and what we're doing for that. And the response is that, we want to take a significant amount of time in order to ensure that we are making a comprehensive recommendation for deer. But with the zoning change, I believe just last month, we were appointing people to the ad hoc zoning committee. And today we're now voting on a new zoning amendment. I feel like there's some specific things in the zoning amendment regarding sizes and heights. And my question is, how did we determine those numbers and figures?
So I can answer that. We worked with the ad hoc zoning committee and and ASHIC, the planning consultant, who, spends essentially their whole professional lives developing these sorts of zoning, ordinance amendments. And, that's where we got this sort of, again, the first step in this process, as I would describe it, right? You're looking at a zoning ordinance that probably hasn't been comprehensively updated for many, many decades. So this is sort of a walk before you can run kind of thing, at least in my opinion, right? And obviously, other members of council are welcome to chime in, Mr. Graziani as well. But, we needed to start somewhere because the current ordinance is so sort of outdated and sort of inadequate in my opinion. So while this is certainly not the be all and end all, I think this is a big step in the right direction. Again, it's not going to be the permanent final set of regulations, and this is not, to be clear, I think he said this is a vote on the amendment. We're just voting to move this process forward, right? So there will be time to take in additional input before the actual vote on the amendment.
Right, but we've also known that the issue with the zoning has existed for quite some time. We've been asked by community members for over a year plus to revise this zoning for the C1 distribution center specifically. And for us to be moving this quickly, it just seems again a bit abrupt, given that there has been a pretty big pause and silence in response to residents who have asked about the zoning changes. To now be moving forward, it seems very reminiscent of what happened previously.
Duly noted. Is there any other discussion on the matter? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Extension is noted, motion carries. Moving forward to number 3. Mr. President, I will make a motion directing the borough manager to advertise a bid request for the Crystal Borough radar speed feedback signs installation. Any discussion on the line? Yeah, so in summary, these are the speed signs that we got currently from Senator Costa to purchase. And the next step that we have to cycling, installing, permit work is all done. We're hopeful that the cost that we under the thresholds probably better in place in that business and kind of upfront phone calls and trying to get it delivered here. We have to move to the public building. It's going to delay it a little bit longer, but we're working on it and we're looking. This is grant money and it's all about, yeah. I meant to say, it's really sweet. If someone thinks they're something, what do we have that's gonna? Fortunately, the door. I'm good. All right, this is still the table, any other discussion? Go ahead. The local congratulations will be taken up. It's a great thing that I'm doing. Just reflect the smoking for the motion. Any other discussion on the matter of advertising? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? And we close it out. Mr. President, I just ask you. Tested the same, this, model, so we want to do more service. Stop. Just continue on. See if I can do this. This may be what I would leadership. But I keep looking to see what's coming across from that passion. So far, it's a good. We're still working on I'm texting people and telling me feedback. Let's move on. Second item is number 9.
Sorry.
Comment about the traffic comment.
Yeah, we can cover that under the
Oh,
infrastructure.
oh,
yeah.
Yep, as soon as we get down into that section right after this, that's the next kind of section of staff and support it, and then committee report. So where are we at here with regard to this ICA? What's the discussion of the day?
So, I mean, as folks will recall, the council adopted a sanitary sewer lateral testing ordinance last month. It's effective on September 1st. And one of the things that's been discussed is about who's actually going to be reviewing the testing data. And I know Alex has had conversations with his counterpart at Wilkins. I think we briefly discussed it with council that the idea would be to sort of farm out that work and have Wilkins, the professionals at Wilkins review that camera work and on behalf of the borough. And so in order to do that, we need an intergovernmental cooperation agreement. We have or will, after this meeting, send a draft to Wilkins for review with the idea being that these must be approved by resolution. So we want to get feedback from Wilkins Township first, make sure they're comfortable with the terms and conditions we prepared. And if everything looks good, we'll have this teed up for a resolution to approve next month.
Our agreement with Wilkins.
Beautiful thing.
It is. Absolutely. So who's running that? A little inside joke for myself there. I'll let that go.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for that point. That was really funny to me. I know nobody else got my joke. Don't worry, it was funny. Moving on to staff, starting with the engineer. Anything?
Oh, sorry, I'll just add, just to read it out here, that in addition, we're planning to have an open house to discuss the implementation of lateral ordinance on Tuesday, August 22nd, from 5 to 7 p.m. That'll be held at the Borough Building. And part of that is we'll also be inviting realtors and local closing companies so we can educate them, pass out the forms, make sure that those folks are up to speed on everything as well.
I'm remiss to have missed that, so thank you very much.
No problem.
Great idea.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of quick items. I know that you did already receive in your packet our project status report for the month, but the paving project is essentially complete. There are some minor punch list items that are still being completed, and there'll be a final pay application expected for the August meeting. And just one other quick item regarding sanitary sewer work. There were a couple of priority repairs that have come up within the last month. So you may see contractors out there working with us next month. That's all.
Outstanding. Any questions for the engineer?
Traffic calming. I know that typically in your report, there is always a line item that says that Gateway is working on traffic calming measures. And so can you speak in detail regarding those traffic calming ideas?
Yeah, and as we state within there that we're perfectly capable and willing to work on traffic calming measures and working with borough staff. We've met with PennDOT recently, and we've talked about utilizing the upcoming active transportation plan as a mechanism to include those traffic calming measures. At this point, we have not done any work associated specifically with traffic calming measures aside from the permitting for the speed signs as has been directed.
And why we're just kind of discussing with particular thoughts or ideas?
I mean, the particular thought and ideas that we've known for, I've been on council since what, 2022 at this point. And we've talked in great length about the need for addressing some of our roadways due to issues with traffic speed, traffic safety, etc. And I know we've talked about Beulah Road in particular, being a state-owned road and deferring to the state as far as managing that. However, we cannot continue to kick the can. And so I've looked at some of the Gateway engineers' reports over the course of the last year, and there has been notation about traffic calming measures, but nothing in specificity. And so I would like to understand where we are with addressing the traffic concerns, because there's people on Beulah Road who are afraid to come into their front yard. And so I want to consistently bring that to the forefront so that we are addressing it and not just pushing it to the side.
To be clear, they're not invoicing us for work.
Yeah, I'm fully aware.
Understood, but we also pay $30,000 plus a month for engineering services. And it is something that is notated in the monthly report, regardless of whether it's an actual line item that they're charging us for, there is mention of traffic calming measures. And so I'm asking for clarification.
Yeah, so when we had the meeting back in June 6th with the PennDOT to discuss Beulah Road, that subject was raised, as well as the active transportation that we do have a grant for, and we're pursuing another grant for. We don't have funds right now, where I've been able to secure funds to do an additional traffic calming plan. The measures that would be placed, whether they be raised speed humps or different kinds of signage or painting, need to be done under clear objective engineering standards. So it's not something that, I can say to Migliotti, why don't you guys go ahead and spray paint this, or Liberoni, why don't you go ahead and do that? So those are certain things we want to address. We've chosen the active transportation plan because that is going to identify limits to bicycle and pedestrian movements, in the borough. You mentioned Pannoni. Pannoni's the LTAP consultant. That's the local technical assistance program under PennDOT. They were also present at the June 6th meeting, and they have helped us a little bit with some ideas about Forest Drive and Beulah Road, as well as Lewin Lane and Beulah Road, and those are things that we've addressed. They're also right now helping us to see how we can move the large signals from Churchill Road up to McCready over into the TIP, which is a traffic improvement program for the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. In doing that, we'll look at all the pedestrian movements. At the meeting, we noted there is no legal way to cross the street over here by Churchill Road and the entrance to Westinghouse. So I agree. Every day that goes by is kind of another day that we need to get at it, and we are. But all of these things take time. It's a big priority, I know, Matt.
Well,
in your
yeah,
community.
I'd jump in, Alex, and say too that, you know, in addition, this is something that the infrastructure committee started work on. And then, just so everyone's clear, there was a retirement at PennDOT where there was a large length of times where we kept reaching out to the person that was supposed to be our point of contact and got nothing back. So there was some delay on the state end. As Alex stated, we had a wonderful meeting with PennDOT where we finally got them to the table. Part of traffic calming is a stepwise approach though, and of course, that was waiting on the grant funding to come in for our speed signs, which are gonna be put out, so that's step one. We've also done some work, our public works, you know, to remind folks, did work on clearing those intersections to make them more visible, to improve sight lines so that we could work on that. And then, you know, the next steps on traffic calming, again, were some of the action items coming out of the PennDOT meeting, is we're gonna, you know, be looking at other options as well. One of those things might be a restriping at some of those intersections. And that's something they have to study. We can't just come back and say, oh, we're gonna do that tomorrow, but you know, we hope to have lit a fire under them with the last meeting and continue to progress that work. But you know, I think things are progressing. Government sometimes moves slow, but we're gonna get the speed signs out. We're gonna look at the restriping, and we're gonna continue to pursue our active transportation plan and overall calming.
I have a question about that. Do you think it would be helpful, once we gather that data from the speed, to be able to push things forward a little faster? I understand that.
So as far as pushing it forward, again, you know, that depends on what the priority is for PennDOT for that road. I mean, you know, of course, people that live on that road want it to be, you know, slowed down more. PennDOT might come back and say, hey, this should really be a 40-mile-an-hour road, because of the way traffic needs to move through here and the way it's striped. Now, that's part of what we talked about in the meeting, is that, you know, we want to look at ways that we can maybe necessarily remove some of those extra lanes that don't need to be there, so that that becomes a more naturally slow corridor. But again, that's part of the discussion with PennDOT and how we can work together, and part of their study that we have to do.
Thank you.
And so just to bring this to a bit of a close, I think, if I'm understanding it properly, our committee has and continues to work with PennDOT, which is the authority on the road that we're dealing with. Right? We do not have the authority on that road, and yet we have been working with them to try and get the steps done in order to address it. I know that there have been conversations with our state senator on the issue, because I've had them myself. And again, that he tries to have conversations then with PennDOT to make sure they show up at the table, because again, they're their authority. I think there are limitations, and I recognize the frustration of government. It turns out government is very slow.
Yes.
A difficult reality for all of us, and we all have priorities that we want to see done, right? And particularly those that deal with the safety and security of our residents. And yet we are at the mercy, quite frankly, of the state of Beulah, of the county of Greensburg Pike, to address those issues. And then even when we're talking about within our own roads, right, that we do so in a way that we have properly studied it, that we've taken the proper steps, and that we're not acting haphazardly, because that ends up being less effective, not more effective. So I think it is clear that the infrastructure committee has been and continues to work on the issue, and that it's something that we take extremely seriously.
And there's been a number of things that staff has done. We have increased painting of stop signs, stop bars. We have been very proactive in removing brush from signs. We've added new signs, including no outlet signs where there weren't ones existed. I think we've ordered like 30 of those. And there are things that we're doing just quietly, Ralph and the Public Works Department are doing, just because we know we need to be doing it. We need to wait for permission in some of those cases, and we're doing it. Well, it's interesting, just on the signs alone, I think we ordered this, the no outlet signs, and it took almost 3 months to get those, just because of supply issues. And then when we have the no truck signs on Hall Road, those also took a couple months. Things are just a little different than what we're used to, but hopefully we'll be addressing more of those. And if there are other issues that council is seeing, like for example, a speed limit sign that a tree is growing over, you know, we gotta be proactive, all of us in that, and say, hey, let's get on and cut that back so it can be seen.
I know Brooke, you had a,
So before.
I'm gonna let Diane go, then you have closing comments.
We're
Brooke and I both attended a meeting with Representative Salisbury, where there was extensive conversation about the frustration of many municipalities in dealing with these kinds of issues. So it was good that people were there that evening because here's a newly elected representative who heard very clearly from particularly boroughs where we are at, as Brooke knows, where we are at a disadvantage because of our inability to use technology with respect to speeding. Boroughs are forbidden from using certain kinds of technologies, crazy, for that. So the big danger is speed. The big danger is automobile accidents and speed and pedestrians. And so that's a continuing struggle. But I did want to mention that Representative Salisbury is aware,
Also aware.
yeah, that this is a broader issue than it is just for us.
So in addition to what Councilwoman Law is stating as far as the meeting with Abigail Salisbury, I also attended with the borough manager a PennDOT meeting back in, I believe it was either April or May. And we were able to get the contact information necessary for continuing the conversation about addressing Beulah Road. What I'm suggesting is not that we make an abrupt placement of traffic calming measures. What I'm asking is that we've known this issue has existed for quite some time, beyond a year. For probably as long as the borough has been in existence, there's been an issue with Beulah Road. And so let's not skim over by saying that we need to do a study, because studies have been done. And so there is now time for action to be taken, and not just to continue to say that we need to do a study, because we have a lot of data to support our position for traffic calming measures to be implemented.
And I appreciate your comment. I would just point out, we're gonna move forward. Again, this falls within the state's jurisdiction, so we cannot take action on Beulah Road unilaterally like that. It requires PennDOT, and therefore our infrastructure committee is working with PennDOT to address the issues of speeding. And it has been brought up again on both the state representative and the state senator, again, who can address this through PennDOT.
So Council President.
I'm gonna
before you
move forward. I
before
appreciate-
you move forward,
Brooke,
what I'm
please.
suggesting again is that we strengthen our partnership with the state,
Right.
similar to the partnership that I strengthened with the county to get Greensburg Pike paid in a matter of months. So again, what I'm saying to you is, I understand that it's the state's purview, but being that it's a state road that runs through our municipality, we need to be more proactive with that conversation.
Duly noted. and I'm
Have
sure
been
that-
very proactive, Brooke. I am on the Public Safety Committee and the Infrastructure Committee. I've been in all of those meetings, and we are as proactive as, I rest assured, as proactive as we could possibly be. To some extent, or a major extent, our hands are tied. Not that we're not moving forward, and we will be moving forward. Everybody on the table knows we've been pushing and pushing. I was at the meeting with Abigail Salisbury not too long ago, as Diane, Councilperson Law pointed out. And she is well aware, everyone is well aware, we are pushing so hard, Brooke, to get that ratified, because we all know what a problem that is there. It is a very dangerous problem. And it really is first and foremost because public safety is of our utmost concern. So rest assured, we are doing everything we can with the Public Safety Committee, the Infrastructure Committee, and meeting with all the people who really are going to help us out.
So what is the follow-up to the June 6th meeting that you had with PennDOT?
So-
Is there a course of action that's one?
So again, I'm gonna bring this to a close. So the infrastructure committee is working with.
Included in the binder of the.
Yeah, it's there, it's done, it's in front of you. We're gonna move forward with this because I don't want to kind of become circular in this space. I am gonna ask if the chief has anything that he would like to comment before we continue on.
No, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, sir. No doubt about it. Moving on to my magical solicitor.
No, sir.
You, borough manager and supporting staff. Easy peasy. I will now turn it back to, make sure I didn't miss anybody on staff, got everybody. Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely. Just wanted to have one of my signs with me tonight. We're just 2 days away from a month for our community day. Says the 10th, but it's August 12th up at phase 1 in the summer. But
You gotta move over to the one, I've got to.
mark that on
You
your
control the
calendar. We're also looking for volunteers. It's a 2.
That's it.
So that's my comment about the community. And we're also.
So hold the sign up again, you gotta hold it up again, because now they can see it, sorry.
You're really committed to the place.
You gotta-
I see this, I see this.
I got it.
So what are we talking about?
August 12th, community day,
Okay.
phase 1 of school.
Churchill.
I thought you were saying release, I didn't get that.
That was by 2. And also, the rec board has really worked hard on this project. It's unbelievable the amount of time that they spent, meeting after meeting, putting this all together. They're still looking for volunteers, whether it's to, help set up, whether to strike it after it's over, or do a little volunteer during that time, whether you're face painting or just helping out. And, they could do that. Janet Paul is looking there, or she'll accept you, or you get a hold of me and I'll give you your name to them. The other thing I wanted to say was that we met this morning with the representative, Principal Mans at the high school, and they're having an open house. I believe it's June 26th. It's from 5 to 8, so, I'm sorry, July. I wrote
2020.
2024. So it's July 26th, open house. Was July 26th, correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't written down it.
that's
Not
right.
in this calendar. But it was 5 to 8. It was an open house at the high school. I will assume everyone's invited. But, do you know anything about that?
I don't, but I can find out the day specifically.
Yeah, all right.
And you can send that, that'd be awesome, I'd love to go, thank you.
Yeah.
Was it the 26th, as Alex then pointed out that he thought it was my birthday. And then my birthday is 20th, but that's my mother's birthday, that's how I know.
No, this
And the mayor's
calendar
birthday is
is
the 28th.
28th. July 28th is an important day.
Yeah, you talked about cake, all kinds of stuff, yeah, I hear it.
Marble, chocolate,
Yeah.
that's what he said, something like that.
Others, any other comments? Prior to close?
Oh, could I just say one thing? What, Mayor Gamrat was talking about Churchill Community Day. Yes, we do need volunteers. They're 2-hour shifts, so you don't have, if you volunteer, you don't have to be there all day. Just a couple of hours of your time would be wonderful. We have food trucks and games and auction items, live music. It's really fun for everybody. I hope everybody will come join us.
Thank you, Deb.
And just a quick thank you to the borough, the police and the fire who came to Blackridge's 4th of July parade. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you to all the volunteers who did it. It was a fantastic parade. The woman in the room, Seal here, does a heck of a job putting all this on, and we had over 100 people. Well over 100 people that came. So it was a lot of fun for all the kids and the neighbors, but thank you to the borough and thank you to everybody who volunteered.
Standing. All right, this time I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before you adjourn, no, I'm sorry, I know it's really warm. And this is totally on me, but, did we announce our executive session?
We did not.
All right, so if
We
you
did
could,
not.
if you could make
So
that.
We did have a very astute point, right? Because we did have an executive session prior to this, pertaining to a legal matter
And litigation.
and litigation.
Yes, thank you.
Uh,
Sorry about missing that.
No, the public needs to know, so I appreciate it, I appreciate it.
And that's all I got. And there is an executive session item at the end of the agenda for post meeting, but I don't think we.
No, we're not.
We don't have,
Yeah,
okay.
so this will be it.
We have hit the wall,
Yeah.
sir, we have hit the wall. This time, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, James, the best, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Harry Kane's be adjourned now. Bundesliga.
Bundesliga.